Visual aid. You don't need that. I'm Simon, I work on German literature. Anybody read any German literature? Probably not. Mein Kampf? Mein Kampf, perhaps? Not really my cup of tea. Anyway, any German authors you may have heard of? Thomas Mann, Günter Grass, Franz Kafka. Yeah, you must know Kafka, he's got a shop in Aberdeen that he runs. Anyway, Franz Kafka's also given us an adjective that is Kafkaesque, which means you are trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare with no hope of escape, which for some of the audience will remind them of working at the University of Aberdeen. Yes, so I'm here today to talk to you about my research. Now, what I want you to do is gather round in a fire just here. We'll just start a fire just here. Not too close, not health and safety involved. Okay, gather round the fire. This is how we used to tell stories in the old days. This is how we gathered round, we listened to stories, and this is before Kindles. Remember Kindles? Anyway, so we tell stories. And I'm going to tell you a story today about how stories are important for us, what their function is, what they are, what their role is for us as humans, and that's sort of where I'm going to get with this. But my story is a story in 4 parts, and it begins when I was 14, and I read a story by Franz Kafka called Metamorphosis. Some of you may have read it, and in it a man called Gregor Samsa, who's a travelling salesman who lives a precarious life, is transformed one morning into a bug, and remains in that state, vermin, incapable of work, until finally he dies. Now that's obviously a very depressing story and typical of German literature in so many ways. But when I read this story at the age of 14, I, like Gregor Samsa, did not have a girlfriend. Oh, yeah, there's more of this to come. And so I identified with Gregor. I thought, Gregor is me, I am Gregor. This was great. I felt so wonderful about this, I wrote a poem about it. You'll be very pleased to know I burnt it on my deathbed in the very same fire. So, that was great. But then maybe I read the story wrong, because when I was 19, I went to a lecture at a university in the south of England. Some of you may have heard of it, it's where Inspector Morse went to university. And I went to this lecture, and it was 1988, and at this lecture were the future stand-up comedian Stuart Lee, the future British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Hey! David Cameron should have been there, but it was the Bullingdon Club's away day. They were heading down in a limousine down to Cowley to laugh at the unemployed vermin that Thatcher had left behind after closing down British Leyland. Enough political satire! Okay, so back to the lecture. That's what I'm supposed to be talking about. The lecture informed me that I was wrong. I had identified too much with Gregor, with the central protagonist. So this obviously really annoyed me and depressed me. I went back to my room and I wrote a story. And I can still remember this story. It goes, Simon was a failure. Simon couldn't read properly. Simon would never reach the heights of political office or stand-up comedy. So, anyway, I wrote this letter to my imaginary girlfriend and she probably burnt it. Never mind. Well, actually, the story's not right, because we read it all wrong, because in the end, like Lee and Cameron, but not like Gregor Samsa or Boris Johnson, Simon got a first from his university, and it set him not towards the heights of political stand-up, as David Cameron does it, but to the precarity of an academic existence, which I discovered at the age of 26, when I finally had a girlfriend. Wow, it caused the electrics to go mad. I had a girlfriend at last. But I'd run out of PhD funds. I had PhD funds where they were all running out, so I needed to go and I had a few Kafkaesque encounters with the DSS, who basically said, we're not going to give you any fucking money. And so I chose, in the words of Trainspotting, to teach. So I taught some students, and I found myself standing in front of these same bloody students, teaching the same bloody Kafka text one more time, except now it was a Marxist reading of The Alienation of Labour. It was about how we should not allow ourselves to be captured by the capitalist machine, and we should lie all day in bed pretending to be insects. This was the way forward. Now, my students were bored shitless by my lecturing style, as you yourselves are. And they would only stay awake if they could dream of their future careers as merchant bankers with expensive girlfriends in the city. Precisely the sort of people who would end up destroying the higher education system. Enough political satire. But I believe in teaching, I believe in research, I believe in communicating my research, even via the medium of stand-up. So, in the end, I got a callback. I got a callback from the University of Aberdeen. Fortunately, not the University of Dundee. Thank you. But the University of Aberdeen, who have given me a job for life. I can now teach Kafka forever. It also gave me the time to finish my PhD, which is it allowed me, doing my PhD allowed me to encounter something I wasn't able to encounter at Oxford, which was not bugs, but literary theory. And there's a science bit here. It's only last 30 seconds, it'll be gone. I read the theorist Wolfgang Iser, who suggests that fiction is for us essential to the human nature, to the human condition. We need fiction as a way of glancing, get a very swift glance of ourselves, our ever-changing selves. So I read this and I thought, oh, fuck marks, I'll use Iser instead. So I burnt my PhD notes one more time and wrote a new first sentence. And it said, let me tell you a story. Now, this was not a thesis about Max Bygraves, which is probably a reference far beyond 99% of the audience, but it was, in fact, on Kafka and how Kafka's story allows us to inhabit a bug-like existence for the duration of the story, to get a sense of otherness as well as a sense of ourselves in the process of reading, to put ourselves at the disposal of something that doesn't exist. Gregor Samsa doesn't exist. A bit like my thesis on Kafka, which you all think exists but actually isn't anywhere, not even on the internet. Now that was 80,000 words. This has been about 800 in about 7 minutes. I've got one more story to tell. Last week, when I was 40 years old, well, mid-40s, okay, I'm being generous. When I was in my mid-40s, with a family, with kids, I read a story about a man with family and kids in his mid-40s, who had been arrested in 2002 for apparently no reason and has remained in a penal colony for the past 11 years in detention with almost no hope of escape. That is a truly depressing story, but it's also true because the penal colony is Guantanamo. Thank you very much.